Hello, everyone. This is Matt Hardy. I'm the Senior Program Director for Planning and Performance Management here at AASHTO. I am pleased to welcome all attendees to our 9th bi-monthly Transportation Performance Management webinar series, sponsored by the Transportation Performance Management Pooled Fund, with support from the AASHTO Committee on Performance-Based Management Leadership and FHWA. Today's topic is organizational management and measures. The webinar will cover how state DOTs create and sustain public value and organizational excellence through mindset shifts, continuous improvement, cross-boundary collaboration, social entrepreneurship, and technology. We'll wrap up our session today with a panel discussion. We have an outstanding panel of organizational management experts in our lineup today, including Professor Mark Fagan from the Harvard Kennedy School at Harvard University, Daniel Fodera from FHWA, Gary Vansuch from the Colorado DOT, and Charlie Purcell from the Iowa DOT. This should be a really engaging, fast-paced, and informative session. Now, a few brief logistics. First, for more information on this webinar series, visit the TPM portal at tpm-portal.com. Click on TPM webinar series under events in the main menu. Again, tpm-portal.com. You can access the presentations for today's webinar at the bottom of the webinar control panel on your screen. Links to the video and slides from today's webinar and archived content from previous webinars will also be posted on the AASHTO TPM portal, again at tpm-portal.com. All webinar attendees are muted. If you have questions for the presenters during today's webinar, please use the Q&A functionality on your webinar, your GoToWebinar control panel. And now I'm going to put on my other hat with the AASHTO welcome. This Transportation Performance Management webinar series is a collaboration among FHWA, AASHTO, and the TPM Pooled Fund. Because of this partnership, we are able to support the broad TPM community in sharing new ideas and building capacity on the topics of greatest interest to all of you. I think you are going to enjoy today's presentations and panel discussion on organizational management and measures. Many thanks to our AASHTO Committee on Performance-Based Management, Organizational Management Subcommittee co-chairs, Charlie Purcell from the Iowa DOT and Deanna Belden from the Minnesota DOT for your leadership in helping us to develop this webinar. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Hyun-A Park to share our agenda for today's webinar. Hyun-A, all yours.
Thanks, Matt. Okay, first up on our agenda will be Christos Xenophontos from the Rhode Island DOT, who will introduce Professor Mark Fagan from the Kennedy School at Harvard. He'll be talking about the latest thinking on organizational management and creating public value. After that, we'll have Daniel Fodera from Federal Highways, who will provide a brief summary of FHWA's enterprise performance management initiatives. Next, we'll hear from Gary Vansuch from the Colorado DOT, where they have a long history of using lean to improve organizational outcomes and meet their customers' needs. Then Charlie Purcell from the Iowa DOT will provide an overview of his agency's business planning initiative, which represents a much more tactical approach than their previous strategic planning efforts. We'll follow up our presentations with a panel discussion moderated by Professor Fagan and Matt Hardy. And just a reminder, please submit your comments or questions using the Q&A feature of the webinar control panel at any time during today's presentations. Now I'll turn it over to Christos, who's the Assistant Director at the Rhode Island DOT. He's also the TPM Pooled Fund lead, as well as the AASHTO Committee on Performance-Based Management Vice Chair, to introduce our first speaker.
Hello, everyone. This is Christos Xenophontos, Assistant Director for the Rhode Island Department of Transportation, Vice Chair of AASHTO's Committee on Performance-Based Management, and Chair of the TPM Pooled Fund that is proud to bring you today's webinar on public value creation and operational performance measures. I know that we care about the topic because of the great number of people that are here today. This is the 9th installment of our TPM webinar series, and with each one, we continue to advance the state of the practice and help improve the performance of our agencies. And that is what is the core of today's webinar. How do we continuously improve our agencies? How do we create and sustain value with everything that we do? And how do we achieve organizational excellence through our people, through our systems, and through our processes? As our agencies have evolved from departments of public works to departments of transportation, creating value for our customers, citizens, and society at large must be front and center if we want to succeed in the next transformation towards mobility-focused agencies. And that is one that is being thrust upon us. It's not one that we can sit back and wait for it. Please join me in welcoming our great panel and presenters for today. It is my honor and privilege to welcome and introduce a good friend of Rhode, Mark Fagan, lecturer at the Harvard Kennedy School and visionary on many areas that we care deeply for. Thank you. Enjoy the webinar. Looking forward to hearing more about the topic. Bye-bye.
Hello, I'm Mark Fagan. I'm on the faculty at Harvard University's Kennedy School of Government. One of the topics that I enjoy exploring is operational and organizational excellence. This is an idea that's been around for decades, and what we'll be doing in the next 15 minutes is exploring how this concept can be relevant for you in your organization. I'm going ahead and share my screen and walk you through some thoughts on this. So let me start with the idea of the key attributes associated with operational excellence. One way to do that is to look at a word cloud. When you do, often what you'll see are these. So excellence obviously in the middle, but quality, reliability, evaluation, goal, results, compliance, vision, strategy. These are all of the elements that go into developing organizational excellence. The idea behind organizational excellence really came out of the private sector, and it was kind of initiated as a way to try and enable organizations to create more value. In the private sector, that's a relatively straightforward issue to measure because we can look at shareholder value. The example I'm showing you here is Tesla and its stock value, and we can look at over a 10-year period different events that took place that show you how shareholders have valued this company, and it really is the bottom line indicator of success. Now, I'm not suggesting that it is the only measure of success, but it is certainly one and one that dominates. We've seen in the years concepts like the balanced scorecard by Kaplan and Norton, which take you not just to the financials, which this represents, but how are we doing in terms of our employees, our community? Are we developing innovative products, our customers? So I don't want to be viewed just as shareholder is all that counts, but it is a dominating factor and it is readily measurable. Now, let's then switch our focus to what we care most about, which is the public sector. And how do we create more value through organizational excellence? When we begin this discussion, we have to recognize that there are some public sector challenges. You face them all the time. The first is, of course, who is the customer? There are lots of different customers. Is the customer for your road the truck or the car that's traveling along it? Is it the cyclist who's using it? Is the pedestrian who's coming along it? There are a variety of different customers, and how we think about excellence needs to be viewed through their varying lenses. In the case of the private sector, they like your product, they buy it. They don't like it, they don't. We don't have that. And we really don't have it with item number 2. I use the term monopoly, and I put it in quotes, because sometimes public services are the only game in town. Here in Massachusetts, if you want to own and drive a car, you are required to register it and license yourself and the vehicle through the Registry of Motor Vehicles. There is but one. You must use it. And so in that environment, we don't have competitive pressures that may be driving direct and impactful innovation. A third constraint is procurement. We need procurement to be transparent and fair and equitable, but oftentimes that actually inhibits our ability to test some new ideas or bring new suppliers into the fold because there's a certain learning curve you have to come down to engage in public procurement. There are also some staffing challenges. It is, frankly, a little harder to both hire and fire in the public sector than it is in the private sector. There are two other factors that I think make ensuring that we create value and achieve operational excellence in the public sector particularly important. One of which is we are using the compulsory taxing authority to fund what we do. We don't give the citizens a lot of choice. We charge them a tax and we deliver a service. I think that obligation for them to pay creates an obligation for us to be incredibly effective with the resources we have. And finally, and I shouldn't call it finally, maybe it actually is more at the beginning of the list, in the public sector we have equity as a primary goal. And that is often different than what exists in the private sector. So I've given you this set of challenges. Of course, this is nothing new to you. You live these every day. Let's turn our attention to what is our measure of value. And here I want to introduce you to the idea of public value. One of my colleagues here at the Kennedy School, Mark Moore, back in 1995, coined the term public value, and here's how he describes it. It equates managerial success in the public sector with initiating and reshaping the public sector enterprises in ways that increase their value to the public, both in the short term and long term. The keys here, short term, long term, and public. We're looking at societal value, not just that of the individual customer. One of my favorite ways to explore this is thinking about automated trash collection. So this is the automated trash collection that comes by my house. And here's an interesting question. Does this shift from the more traditional approach where there were two people on the back of the truck and one driving it to pick up the trash? Now we've got one driver in a complex machine. Is this creating public value? On the surface, you immediately go to, well, if we're going from 3 head count to 1, there could be some real benefits, although we have to remember these are people and we have some obligations to them. But it goes much more deeply than that. We need to think about, well, from the perspective of the citizenry, is additional value created? For example, it turns out that the bins that you use have wonderful wheels. Instead of dragging out an old barrel, now you have this very easy wheeled vehicle or wheeled trash bin. So that actually helps from an equity perspective some of our older residents or those who have less physical capability. The lids on these turns out to be animal resistant. So if we have less animals getting into the trash, maybe we have actually better health outcomes because we know that more trash, more rats, worse health outcomes. It also turns out that if you have a cleaner environment, housing values appreciate. I use this as an example not to be comprehensive, but to show you what the idea of public value is all about. Now, it's nice to talk about public value. Let's turn our attention to where value gets created from this conversation, which is around how do you actually do it. I think the first way to create more public value is a mindset shift. And the example I want to use comes from Iowa DOT. The mission statement they used to have is getting you there safely, efficiently, and conveniently. Their mission now is making lives better through transportation. You can see a very prescribed and operational focus moving to a much more holistic focus. We've got to shift our mindset away from individual functional achievement to a bigger picture way of creating value for the public. A second way to create value is through Kaizen. Kaizen is ever better. It's part of the total quality management movement, and it is in many ways the idea of continuous improvement. Continuous improvement is not a new idea, but I think the operationalization of it with Kaizen is really important, because as you can see, you start with get employees involved early. Have them help you understand where are the problems, where are the challenges. Have them help develop solutions, test the solutions, measure the solutions, and figure out how to continually improve. In addition, we can engage the customer in this process as well. Here, maybe it's 311, where we look at our customer input to know where there are additional opportunities. The key here, get the people who do the work engaged. A third area, cross-boundary collaboration. Oftentimes in public organizations, and certainly in departments of transportation, there's a lot of siloing. I have my function and others have others. But the fact is, often we need to cross boundaries. Maybe they're horizontal within DOT. Maybe they're vertical, and we need to get not just DOT engaged, but maybe we need to get public safety engaged, or the school department engaged. We may want to think holistically about the stakeholders, this idea of customers and who they are and how we engage them. We may think about demographics or geographics. The more holistic we have by crossing boundaries, the greater it is that you'll be able to create value. Another area of value is the idea of social entrepreneurship. Everyone knows what entrepreneurs are. They're the ones that are coming up with new creative ideas to create more value. We can do that in the exact same fashion, but in a social context. We again want to be solving problems, but our focus is more on creating social value. We want to be impatient, but we also have to recognize kind of the social aspects, the philanthropic bent that we have. So here I'm trying to take the ideas of private sector entrepreneurship and overlay them into our public world as well. And finally, I want to talk about the role of technology, because technology is, especially in our world of transportation and mobility, changing very rapidly. I'm using here examples of autonomous vehicles and associated AI. This is an area I have passion about. I run here at the school the Autonomous Vehicles Policy Initiative, where we help catalyze policy making for state and local governments. This is a huge area of opportunity and a really distinct way of creating value. These ideas for creating value are terrific, but we need a way to know, are we really getting there or not? And that leads to my last observation. We need measurement management. Now, those words are important. The idea of measurement is I got to know if I'm performing well or not, but I also have to have a way of using those measurements to manage more effectively. CityStat is a managerial approach that's been very successful. Baltimore CityStat that I'm showing here is one of the early players. It has now been applied in many, many geographies. And what it is a periodic meeting of the key players in the city or state, where each one of the department heads comes in on a weekly, 2-weekly, 3-weekly basis and shares, here's my performance, here's what's gone well, here's what I'm correcting, and here's how I can get ahead of challenges for the future. If this is something you're interested in, Google Baltimore CityStat. There's some wonderful videos on it. but a colleague of mine, Bob Bain, has written a wonderful book called Performance Stat Potential, which really looks at how do you use this approach to manage more effectively. So with that, I hope I've given you some ideas on how you can bring organizational excellence to your own world. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Mark. Your presentation did a brilliant job of providing an introduction and setting the context for the rest of this session. Remember, if you have any questions, just enter them into the Q&A panel and we'll address them during the panel discussion. Next up is Daniel Fodera, who will talk about FHWA's Enterprise Performance Management Initiative and how they plan to operationalize their strategic plan. Daniel is the Corporate Performance and Risk Management Officer in the FHWA Office of Infrastructure. He has held FHWA positions in field offices and headquarters. Prior to joining FHWA, he served in the U.S. Navy in various positions. Take it away, Daniel.
Great, thank you, Yana. Can you see my screen and hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, that was an excellent presentation by Mark. I think that you'll see a lot of the things that we're going to talk about today tie into that. So what we are calling enterprise performance management, I think, is FHWA's latest step on our journey towards organizational excellence. We've been working on improving our organization for quite a number of years. And so what this latest effort is, I'm going to talk about the creation of the FHWA Enterprise Performance Management Team, what our drivers are for that, how we use this for planning for the IIJA and implementing the US DOT strategic plan. I'll give you a little bit of the pieces that we're going to, a little bit of the pieces of how we are implementing EPM in FHWA, and then I think we'll have a little bit of time for Q&A at the end. So the first question, this is the problem we're trying to solve, or the question we're trying to solve is how do we operationalize the strategic plan? And when I talk about the strategic plan, we're talking about administration priorities, the new legislation, how building and maintaining a strong organizational framework. And we established some principles to guide how we're going to solve this problem. It has to be simple and easy, and it must not take a lot of time. One of the problems, or one of the issues with organizational planning, is that people see it as outside their normal work, and so we want to make it add to their work. We want to make it add. I'm sorry. We want to make it add value to delivering their programs. Mark talked quite a bit about adding value, and so I was glad to see that he talked about that. That's one of the principles we're using. The value creation proposition that, of course, depends on the different program area that you're working on. Another principle that we established in operationalizing enterprise performance management is that it has to be relevant to every individual. Again, one of the issues that we found in the past with strategic planning is people at the working level, at the operational level, saying, you know, I don't understand this. I don't see how I fit in. And so we've been working to ensure that we establish a framework so that people can see how they fit. So to kick that off, we created a new enterprise performance management team in Federal Highway. And our purpose of this team, it's led by Susanna Reck. I think y'all know her. It's to provide guidance and direction to all the FHWA units on organizational performance management. And we achieve that enterprise performance management by creating within FHWA the culture, capabilities, and practices that are needed to support our agency's strategic goals and objectives. Our enterprise performance management integrates risk management into resource allocation decision-making and provides the framework by which we will plan, manage, and evaluate our organization's performance and implement the IIJA. So let's talk a little bit about how that plays out. So what's new? I like the PDCA cycle or the improvement cycle, the Kaizen improvement cycle that Mark showed. I think that's relevant to us. But we're going to start in the upper left quadrant here and start with the strategic plan. And the question there is, how are we going to implement the administration's priorities? The administration priorities, of course, include the new IIJA, and we roll that through the organization through our planning effort, where we're answering the questions, how does FHWA allocate resources to deliver those priorities, to meet those administration needs? Then how are we going to measure success with meeting those priorities? That gets into the performance cycle. How are we going to operate? And then finally, how are we going to evaluate the effectiveness of what we've done? And so how do we use feedback to improve the implementation and begin the cycle again? And so to do that, we've got these several components of EPM. And we've got strategic planning, which of course sets that vision, those overall agency priorities, and then we're going to implement that through our planning process. And FHWA conducts planning at a couple of different levels, this business planning or operational planning. First of all is at the enterprise performance planning and then through unit planning. Enterprise performance planning is the plans for the entire agency, going across and up and down the agency. This is where we lay out on an annual basis those things that is important for the entire agency to pay attention to, the top agency priorities. We use several components of this enterprise performance planning, including program objectives for the entire agency, our agency risk appetite, enterprise activities, as well as opportunities to reduce effort. Enterprise activities are those activities that are going to occur across the organization where we need, let's call it a full court press, where we need all or most of the organizational units across the agency to develop some initiative. Units across the agency, and when I say units across the agency, I'm talking about federal aid divisions, federal lands, highway divisions, as well as headquarters program offices. Units execute the enterprise performance plan by developing their own unit plan. And we do our unit planning on an annual basis that's integrated with our risk management cycle as well as our internal control cycle. So the tools that support both those efforts, the enterprise performance planning and the unit planning, are developing and understanding clear objectives and performance measures. We mentioned the value proposition. In order to understand how you're creating value, of course, you need to understand what outcomes you are trying to achieve. And we do that through developing these the clearly stated objectives or desired outcomes with each of the program areas, and then establishing performance measures where we can set targets where appropriate to show to show the added value or progress in achieving those objectives. We also have recurring activities. Every program area in Federal Highway may have some recurring activities, things that have to be done regularly. Those may be evaluations, it may be reviews, it may be actions, approvals, those recurring activities that exist within each of the program areas. And then also enterprise assessments and reviews. This is our internal evaluation component. We're going to look at and see how we're performing, what the results are, how we are efficient, effective, and compliant in those different program areas. That, of course, incorporates ERM, risk management, as well as the internal control piece. So ERM, or Enterprise Performance Management, brings all of those components together. We have a governance plan through our governance framework to operate and evaluate all of those things at the enterprise level. We have developed, or we're developing, a playbook that explains how those different components that I just went through, how they work together. And I've got a little diagram here of the cycle that we envision for how this works. We've gone through this cycle a couple of times, and we've learned each time we've done it. Starting with the program areas and identifying those program area components that I mentioned, especially understanding the program objectives, the measures, the recurring activities, bringing things before agency senior leadership when we have an opportunity to bring on an enterprise activity, and understanding how the entire agency can advance certain program area objectives, and then adopting those activities at the unit level along with the other components, the agency risk appetite in particular, seeing how that fits into the unit planning. So I mentioned that program area a couple of times. So let me dig down a little bit and talk about how we're doing that, because I think this is a really useful tool. We are building what we call program area profiles that will assist this framework. And a program area profile contains those program objectives. In other words, the value proposition or the desired outcome for each program area. It identifies the measures, how can each of those objectives within a program area be measured. It gives us an opportunity to look at the data. Does data exist to support that measurement? And then also, can we set a target for those measures so that we know what success looks like? Target setting, of course, is aligned with risk appetite. And then we take those profiles, and that information and performance can be shared enterprise-wide to help the units develop their unit plans. So I hope it looks simple, but the next steps are to continue to integrate the strategic direction. As you know, the US DOT is developing the strategic plan for the new administration. So we'll integrate that along with our agency priorities developed through the IIJA. We're going to continue to build on the lessons learned and the experience of the last couple of years of implementation, and the internal resources that we're working on. We've either developed or have deployed our playbook, as well as some internal SharePoint sites. And with that, let me turn it back over to you, Juan.
All right, thank you, Daniel, for that great presentation. Next, we'll hear from Gary Vansuch from the Colorado DOT. Gary is the Director of Process Improvement for CDOT. As a member of the agency's top executive team, Gary directs efforts to improve the organization's operations and to make government more effective, efficient, and customer focused. He has over 40 years of experience in business improvement and change leadership in the energy, financial services, and governmental services sectors. Please join me in welcoming Gary.
Thank you for that kind introduction. Can you give me a thumbs up whether you can see Pikes Peak? All right, that's great. Thanks, folks. We're going to talk about a very important issue about how we get people engaged at CDOT, and I think at a lot of other departments of transportation in improving our business. You see the iconic Pikes Peak from here in Colorado. Catherine Lee Bates was inspired at the top of Pikes Peak to write the iconic song, America the Beautiful. We take our inspiration from our people here at CDOT about how we can make government more effective, efficient, and customers focused. And we're going to chat some about that today. And I'm joined by my wonderful colleague from the Missouri DOT, Deanna Belden. We're both members of the Organizational Management Subcommittee of the Committee on Performance-Based Management. I want to turn it over to Deanna for a few thoughts about that. Deanna, take it away.
Hi, thanks for having me today. Just a couple minutes, and just to clarify, I'm with the Minnesota Department of Transportation. Missouri is much too hot for me, and Minnesota is much too cold. But anyway, this webinar today is really the greatest hits of our Organizational Management Subcommittee of the AASHTO's Committee on Performance-Based Management. We're hearing good stuff today from guest speakers, Mark Fagan and Daniel Fodera, but also now we're going to hear from Gary, who's a member of our our subcommittee, and next will be Charlie Purcell. But our mission is focused on helping state DOTs achieve organizational excellence through improved organizational performance at the strategic, tactical, and operational levels. And we're organized into 3 activities, one of them being the one that Gary leads, that's built around the Transportation Lean Forum and bi-monthly webinars, Lean Process Improvement. Had one held earlier today, so it's a double webinar day for Gary. He's going to highlight some of the good work in a few minutes here. Another activity we're working on, we title it Non-System Performance. We're sponsoring some research that we hope to get funded as a synthesis study on program and project delivery measures. We're also sponsoring a domestic scan proposal titled Leading Practices for Implementing an Organizational Mission that Supports Societal Goals. And this is a beautiful fit with the public value creation as described in Professor Fagan's video. And then finally, our third activity is supporting the agency capability building portal. It's an NCHRP implementation project surrounding that. And so this is just to give you an idea of what our subcommittee is looking at. We'd love to have you involved. We meet on the 3rd Tuesday of the month at 11 a.m. Central. So if you want to get on our mailing list, contact me or Charlie. We also partner with the TRB AJE 15 Workforce Development and Organizational Excellence Committee that has Victoria Beal of Ohio DOT as the chair. And so we welcome you, and I'm going to hand it to Gary to tell you about the good work he's working on. Thank you.
Thank you, Deanna. During the next few minutes, we're going to talk about what process improvement looks like at CDOT. Dr. Fagan talked about Kaizen. Our branding on that here at CDOT is Lean Everyday Ideas. A little bit about CDOT, some of the goals that we have, how we've been able to bring that together at the Colorado Department of Transportation, and perhaps some things that you can borrow in your transportation agency. First of all, for those of you who don't know about CDOT, we are in Colorado. You see some of the wonderful scenery here. We do love to show off our state, Pikes Peak, Garden of the Gods. It's a wonderful state, and we have an important mission here in our state. You also see our iconic Welcome to Colorful Colorado sign that you'll find anytime that you drive into our state on one of our interstate highway system roads. And this is one of our organization charts, but doesn't look like any organization chart you've probably ever seen. We have 3,000 Team CDOTers at over 200 different staff locations. This is a map of Colorado that might actually look like Colorado has freckles. Every dot is someplace where there's a Team CDOTer serving somebody in the public. And the numbers actually indicate the number of people at that location, over 200 different staff locations. That makes sense. We have 104,000 square miles. We have customers across all those 104,000 square miles, and we have assets that serve those customers over those 104,000 square miles. And we have this important mission at CDOT to plan, build, operate, and maintain that Colorado transportation system and improve how we're doing that. And I think that reflects what Dr. Fagan and what Daniel was saying about our obligation as public servants to continuously improve our products and services to benefit everybody who uses those products and services. At CDOT, we have 2 major drivers on that. Now, one of them is the excellence value. We're a values-driven organization. We have 6 values at CDOT. These are long-term values. I've talked to people who've been at CDOT for 45 years. They remember the values being told to them when they came on board. Those 6 values spelled in a mnemonic spicer. That's safety, people, integrity, customer service, excellence, and respect. And lean definition, by definition, is almost exactly the definition that we have up there for our excellence value. We are leaders and problem solvers, continuously improving our products and services. I think that's wonderful, and it's multi-generational value. The other key driver is our Colorado Smart Government Act. All agencies in Colorado are governed by this act from 2013, and says, first of all, we need to establish a statewide performance management system. So we're going to do that. And you heard Dr. Fagan talk about the importance of doing that in some of the work of CityStat, and we've learned from that work. Secondly, to incorporate lean continuous process improvement to increase government efficiency. That's a good thing, and it's baked right into that state law. And then third, all of that's just words unless we actually have training and people working to do that. And so it also requires us to have that state employees receive training on operational excellence. That's all good stuff. And it's actually not only good, but it's a requirement of our legislature and the people of Colorado speaking through that legislature. So I think that's a wonderful thing. And our people are developing great innovations across the state. And one of our challenges here at CDOT is how do we take innovations developed at one corner of our state, perhaps up in Julesburg where we have 8 people, and how do we have information get to the other corner of the state? A similar operation in Cortez, Colorado, as the crow flies, that's probably 500 miles away. How do we do that? Well, that's through the structure that we have on Lean Everyday Ideas. Lean Everyday Ideas supports our excellence value. It's an award winner. We're very thankful to the Harvard Excellence in American Government Awards process, the Innovations in American Government Award. We were a top 25 winner of that in 2018. Part of the obligation of winning all these awards is to help other folks understand how we do it and to provide some guidance in perhaps their own journey to developing a system of continuous improvement and operational excellence. It's good to have a goal. Our goal at CDOT is to foster a culture of improvement where new ideas are valued and tested and shared by engaging everyone in improving our business. There's 2 basic obligations of everybody at CDOT: run the business and improve the business. And our Lean Everyday Ideas is leading that improving the business concept for all of the people that we have at Team CDOT. And proven by research, that's an important thing to do. If we rely only on management to identify ideas and problems, they only see a tip of the iceberg. The front line sees the stuff that's below the waterline, those fundamental issues. That's why it's so important to engage everybody in improving the business. And we take our inspiration from lots of places. Admiral Dr. Grace Hopper had this wonderful saying, the most dangerous phrase in the language is, "We've always done it this way." And of course, she always worked with that pioneering work in computer science to make sure that we didn't always do it that way. And that's what we're dedicated to at CDOT. So if our goal is to streamline processes, we actually have information about this on our external website, leanideas.codot.gov. We had a wonderful team that took a very complicated excise tax distribution process for excise tax in our aeronautics division from a multi-step process to a 2-step process, making things a lot easier on the customers and frankly on ourselves. It's a wonderful, so if our goal is to streamline processes, we're working on that. If our goal is to improve safety, and we ask everybody to work on things that bug them, when we ask our frontline folks, very often they say, I want to improve safety. Here's one of many ideas coming out of, and not just ideas, implemented ideas, coming out of our frontline maintenance folks to improve safety. This is an easier and safer way to lift guardrail. And gosh, we lift guardrail. It's all like almost every day we're lifting guardrail. This makes it safer and easier and better for everybody. If we want to stay organized, we've come up with even simple things in the office environment to color code files to save time and reduce errors. No idea is too small. Every idea helps us on the journey to getting CDOT to be more customer focused, more efficient, and more effective. It's important because, frankly, we're asking employees at CDOT, and I think it's true for across the nation, to do more with less. And the field's rapidly changing, and our customer expectations are rapidly changing. Now we have big ideas, and we work on those too, but those big ideas can only succeed if we have people that have been successful with making smaller ideas and getting those changes to work. So not only do those smaller ideas help us, they help us when we tackle the big ideas too, by engaging people and building the competencies of the people in our organization. We actually used our own lean principles and practices to develop our Lean Everyday Ideas program in 2013 with this wonderful team of folks. We didn't just say, this is what's coming down from the executive suite. We said, help us develop this. Help us to get the best system in place so that we can engage everybody across the organization. Those ideas are happening every day in our workplace. And this is actually coming from the team leader. Whether it's across the state or with adjoining cubicles, we're going to have a happier workforce, more effective workers, and a stronger organization. That was true in 2013. It's certainly true here in 2021, and we hope that's true across the decades coming up. Now, how it works, we actually have an online system. We ask people that have actually developed an improvement in the field to push the I fixed it button. That goes to a Google form. We can collect that data. we can get recognition to those folks, and then we can actually spread that information across the state. It's a wonderful system. Now, sometimes people run into issues where they don't have the solution, but they have the problem. Perhaps a suggestion, we ask them to push the I suggest button. We connect them across the state, across 104,000 square miles of Colorado, with people. We connect a person that has an issue and perhaps a suggestion with people that can actually do something about that and have them work together. So our system at a high level works that way. The iFixit system, we often get an idea card out of that. That idea card and perhaps some videos help us spread that across the state. With the I suggest system, we do get those people together. We get them together with the experts and to see if we can turn that into an implementable solution. An idea card looks like this. It'll have some information about the improvement. It'll usually have a picture of the innovator or the solution that was come up with, and a blue box that says click here for more details. It can tell folks across the state, and frankly, anybody that has access to our public-facing codot.gov website, how to actually implement this solution on their own. It's a wonderful system. We have 358 of those out there right now. There's a QR code. You can scan that. You can get that off your phone. And we try to make this visually appealing so that people can say, that looks like an issue that I've got. I wonder if that can help me solve my issue. 358 out there. I encourage you to click on the Scan Me and to look at some of those Lean Everyday ideas. It's a searchable database online. You can actually put in something that's an issue. We have a lot of issues with guardrail. I think that's true across transportation agencies. People run into guardrail. We have to figure out ways to fix that. We've had people figure out faster, easier, and cheaper ways to do that. And if you can put in guardrail, you can put in any other keyword and help search that database. This is an example of one in our pre-construction area where we're using our earthwork tool. It makes the work of our engineers on pre-construction activities a lot faster. And we have videos of the innovators because we're finding out sometimes those cards are too dry, but hearing from the innovators themselves is a wonderful thing. And you see 3 of the innovators on the screen captures of that video. We have an improvement on mower safety in our maintenance crews. We have one about recycling vinyl banners because we believe in sustainability at CDOT. We have one that comes from our central services as a way of saying, here's a better way of spreading ideas. We're working at CDOT to engage everybody in improving our business, and we hope we've inspired you to do the same. This is my contact information, and the yellow box has more information online that's accessible from any place about our Lean Everyday ideas. Thank you for the opportunity to talk about this today. We'll have a chance for questions and answers later. I'm going to turn it back for our next presenter.
Thank you, Gary. That was a lot that you've been doing, and that's going to be hugely valuable to the community. So wrapping up today's presentations is Charlie Purcell from the Iowa DOT. Charlie is the Deputy Director of the Transportation Development Division at the Iowa DOT. This position is responsible for providing leadership, oversight, and direction for most of the department's project development activities. These include project prioritization, environmental reviews, road and bridge design, right-of-way acquisition, contract lettings, project management, and local agency program oversight and assistance. Now I'll turn it over to Charlie.
Thank you, Deanna. Can everybody see my screen? Not sure if I'm sharing that yet.
Yes, it looks great.
All righty. Well, thank you for the opportunity to share. I want to start by sharing sort of a leadership story that might be somewhat familiar to some of you. So imagine that a new CEO takes over at a state DOT. And one of the first things that the CEO does is work with their executive team to spend many months developing a new strategic plan. They carefully labor over the exact wording of the mission and the vision statements. They establish some lofty goals and some slick strategies that will help them achieve their vision. Then they launch their new plan with great fanfare and excitement. All staff meetings are held to explain how the plan will lead the agency to a better place. Letterhead and logos are updated, and posters with the new mission and vision statements are put up in conference rooms. But after the initial big splash, the excitement begins to wane, and slowly the efforts to implement the ambitious goals and strategies start to lose momentum and eventually stall. And within a year or so, nobody thinks much about the plan or even can remember what the plan was about or why it was created in the first place. So for some of you, this story may be all too familiar. It's the reason I think that why in many agencies, the first reaction of frontline staff to the announcement of a new strategic plan is often sort of a sigh under their breath or an eye roll. Anybody who's been around for a while has seen this movie before, and they know how it ends. So in my 20+ years at the Iowa DOT, I've seen this movie a couple times. However, we have recently embarked on a different kind of plan that is playing out in a much different way. So my goal for this presentation is to explain what makes our current business plan different and share some of the lessons that we've learned along the way as we've developed and rolled out and implemented our plan. So the first lesson that we learned is that we need to start by answering the question of why. Why is this important? Why is this relevant to the work that people do? And this is usually what people want to know first. Until we answer the why, it's hard for them to be interested in the what or the how. So here's how we answered the why. We acknowledge that we do have a strong foundation, but we do face many challenges. And so this was important because we wanted to communicate to people that not everything was broken. Sometimes when you announce a new plan like this, the assumption is that everything we did before was wrong, and now we're going to start over and we're going to do it right. And so this is really, we worked hard to communicate to our folks that this is not about fixing something that was broken, but really about improving upon the progress that we had already made. Secondly, the reason we need to have a plan is to prioritize. Having too many priorities will prevent us from bringing about the strategic change that we really want to see. If everything's a priority, then really nothing is a priority. So leadership, we believe, is just as much about deciding what we're not going to do as it is about what we are going to do. And lastly, we need another plan so that we can continue to adapt and grow. So our response to the pandemic proved that we can be very nimble and adapt when we need to. In a matter of months, we completely changed the way a good chunk of our workforce was working. We switched over to virtual platforms. People were working at home. We figured out new technologies and softwares. We figured out new ways to get our work done. We created new policies and new procedures to enable that. So we've proved that we can quickly move, change, and adapt when we really need to. So we need to capitalize on this ability in order to continue growing and improving. So change is always going to be about challenges, but with those challenges come some significant new opportunities. So we wanted to keep it simple in terms of the content of our plan, so we broke it down this way. Plan essentially has 3 parts. Where are we today? Where are we going? And how are we going to get there? So the next lesson that we learned is to properly set the stage so that people understand where we are. This helps make the case that change is needed and creates a sense of urgency. If the status quo seems acceptable, people will never be able to sufficiently motivate our people to make the necessary changes, because change is hard. So the first step was kind of setting the stage and explaining where we are and what the challenges are. So here are some of the ones that we outlined for our folks. Obviously, everybody is struggling with recruitment and retention challenges these days. When we crafted this plan in late 2020 and early 21, those things were already on the horizon, and they've only accelerated since then. We have experienced challenges with injuries and fatalities among our employees. And in 2020, we lost 2 of our employees to distracted drivers on our roadsides. We also are focusing on updating outdated business systems and processes. And we're doing all of this with fewer staff, more limited budgets and funding, and in the midst of some major disasters like a pandemic, a derecho, which is like a hurricane, straight line hurricane force winds that swept across the Midwest in the summer of 2020, and flooding and droughts. So, and we also need to be preparing for the future. We knew that this recently passed infrastructure bill was on its way, and we knew that was going to be challenging in a lot of respects, in good ways. We know that more automated vehicles are on the horizon, and we need to adapt and change and to be ready for those. We know that the climate is changing, and the improvements that we make to our system to make it more resilient are more important than ever. And we also need to take safety to the next level. So that's kind of setting the stage for why we need a plan that helps us change. The next lesson that we learned is that a plan has to present a clear course of action that helps people understand the direction that we need to move. So this is the where are we going part. So we started by defining the guiding principles that define our culture and the behaviors that we expect from one another. So you can see those on the slide here. And these are really what will guide us as we pursue our mission, vision, goals, and objectives. So these are the things that we're going to hold on to as we go about those things. And I'm not going to dwell a lot on the how we came up with each of these, because I really want to focus more on this presentation for the implementation steps. So the next thing in terms of charting the course was to make a clear statement about what our mission is. And so we frame that as our core focus. And so our core focus or our mission, it really explains why we exist and what we do in the world. And as Dr. Fagan mentioned in his presentation, we also have made a deliberate shift in terms of how we frame our mission to be not just in terms of specific activities that we're going to do, which was previously it was getting you there safely, efficiently, and conveniently, but instead connecting to a much larger societal purpose, making lives better through transportation. And this actually connects to the state of Iowa's mission, which is to improve the quality of life for all Iowans. And so the quality and availability of transportation has huge impacts on our economic competitiveness as a state and also our quality of life. And so that's why we're really tying our mission to making lives better. Next, we need to cast a vision for the future. And we call this our 10-year target. So this is like our vision statement. And this paints a picture of where we want to be in the future. And so the quick summary of that is safest, smartest, and made to last. And so we're really seeking to create a much more customer-focused, safe, reliable, and efficient system to be able to deliver the transportation services in the future. We also needed to define some goals that we're going to guide our efforts over the shorter term. And so these goals define kind of the key focus areas that we're going to be working on over the next 5 years that will move us toward that 10-year target or our vision. And so you can see that there's obviously connections with each of those 5-year, with the vision and that we outlined earlier. And then next, the next lesson learned, and probably really the most important one, is that a successful plan really needs to have an implementation method that's sort of baked in to the plan itself and really integrated into our leadership structures and processes and really even into our day-to-day business. And this is what makes our business plan much more tactical than what we've had in previous strategic plans. So this is really kind of where it gets done and how we figure out how we're going to get there. If we've cast this 10-year vision and we've got these 5-year priority goals, how are we going to accomplish that? So a big part of our plan really is focused on that, on the implementation piece. So first, annually, we set objectives. We call them our 1-year objectives for a calendar year. And these, of course, align with those 5-year priority goals. Now we review and update these objectives each year. So what's shown here is our objectives for calendar year 2021. Our executive team is already engaged in the process of identifying what our objectives are going to be for the next calendar year. Some of them are similar. Some of them have been adjusted and refocused a little bit based on what we've learned over the past year. Next, we talk about our quarterly rocks. So you might be wondering, why do we call these rocks? So in the pictures on the screen kind of illustrate what we're talking about here. So imagine that you're given some sand and some little pebbles and medium-sized rocks and big rocks, and your job is to try to fit as much of that into that mason jar as you can. Now, if you take the approach outlined in the top picture, where you put the sand in first and then the little rocks and then the medium size and the big ones, you can see that they don't all fit. But instead, in the bottom picture, if you were to put in the big rocks first, then the medium-sized rocks, fit them in around them, then the smaller stuff, and then the sand, you can find that you can actually get a lot more into the same size jar. And so that's the idea behind rocks. What are those big things that must get done this quarter in order to keep us on track to accomplish our one-year objectives? So that's what we mean by a rock. So these are just simply quarterly goals. They're drawn from those one-year objectives, broken down to make those into some more bite-sized pieces. And so again, we review those every quarter. We assess how we did. We have an owner for each rock. Somebody has their name on it who is responsible for ensuring that that rock gets done and reporting on the status of that rock. And this is a regular thing that we review as part of our leadership team meetings. Next, we really need to have a lot of focus and effort on monitoring and reporting on progress. And so I phrase this as inspect what you expect. And this really helps create some healthy accountability. It occurs as a regular part of our leadership team meetings on very frequent basis, either 2 weeks or at least every month, where we pull out that set of rocks and our objectives, and we go down through those one by one, and each owner of the rock reports on the status. Is it on track or is it off track? There's no weasel room. It's one or the other. It's on track or off track. Now, we're shooting for progress, not perfection. So what do I mean by that? Well, we're not expecting that actually we're going to accomplish 100% of our rocks each quarter. In fact, if that's what's happening, probably we're setting the bar too low. And that's sometimes what happens when you establish some accountability measures like this. People will set their rocks such that there's no way they can fail, right? And so that's actually not really helping us. When you stretch a little bit, sometimes you're going to fall short. But the reality is, if you set those goals to stretch you a little bit, you're going to accomplish much more than if you set sort of safe goals or safe rocks. And so we assess and adjust each quarter. So if the rock didn't get completed, we need to ask ourselves, is this really a priority? If so, should we simply move this rock to the next 90 days? Maybe it needs to be adjusted. Maybe the rock is really too big to tackle in just 90 days. Maybe it should be broken down even further. So those are the kinds of questions that we ask as we assess and adjust those rocks. And next, one of the really important parts is you have to work this down through the whole organization. And so a lot of what I've been describing is happening at the executive team level. But each division also follows the same process. So not every division in business unit necessarily has a rock that relates to each of those objectives for the agency and 5-year priority goals. Obviously, the different parts of the agency are working on different things, and so we take a divide and conquer approach. But it does keep us aligned when you kind of work this down through the organization and at the division level, and usually one level down below that, we are looking at, okay, what are those agency goals and objectives? How can our division or our business unit contribute to those? What are the objectives and rocks that we're going to set to do that? And then work that plan. And so by doing that, that really helps keep us able to distribute our work throughout the agency, but also keeps us aligned overall and all rowing in the same direction, trying to accomplish the agency level goals and objectives. So again, there's regular monitoring and reporting that occurs as part of our regular team meetings, where every couple weeks or at least every month, you're going through your list and you're reporting on those and adjusting and moving forward as you need to. So rinse and repeat. That's the process that we're following. And we think it's really important to have a regular rhythm or review of reporting and updating. And that really helps keep the plan from becoming stale and just kind of put on the shelf and eventually forgotten about, which all too often happens with strategic plans. So we're going to assess those rocks at least quarterly. The objectives are reviewed and reassessed annually. And then those 5-year priority goals are also part of an update to our business plan that occurs every 5 years. We refresh and review those goals. We expect that this plan is going to live and grow and evolve as we do, but also at the same time provides us with a consistent framework for continuity over time. So that's what I had to share about our business plan. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have during the panel discussion, which I believe is coming up next.
Thanks, Charlie. And thanks to the entire presenters today for your excellent delivery and content. And thank you to all our attendees. This webinar series would not be possible without all of you. So if I could invite all of our panelists to come back on screen and turn it over to Matt Hardy and Mark Fagan for the panel discussion.
Welcome, everyone. The materials that you've had the opportunity to hear today, I thought were really interesting for me. Hopefully they were for you as well. What we want to use this session for is to give an opportunity to those on the panel to share some of their perspectives on a variety of different issues that came up in this. And I actually want to start with when Christos did his introduction. He talked a little bit about the role of people, of processes and systems and technology. And I'm curious to hear from the panel, when you look at those three, is there a particular sequencing that organizations should be focused on? Do this first, second, third, or do you see them happening simultaneously? What's your take on how best to develop that organizational excellence in those three areas? And maybe, Charlie, since you were just up, I'll start with you and then we'll head off to Gary next.
Okay. Yeah, so I would say you do need to work on them simultaneously, but if you're looking for where to put the emphasis, I really do think it has to start with the people. We've been making some significant investments in our people in a couple different ways. For the last 4 years or so, we've been actively measuring and trying to improve the levels of our employee engagement. There's a lot of research out there that indicates that the engagement of your employees is directly tied to some very measurable business outcomes. Less turnover, greater productivity, even greater levels of safety. And so we've been making some concerted efforts to help equip our managers and supervisors, which are really the ones that end up having an outsized influence on people's levels of engagement, to help them be better people leaders. In addition to that, we've embarked recently on a new leadership development masterclass series that really is focused on those people leadership skills. Because in a technical organization like this, the reality is that sometimes people get promoted to positions of management simply because they were the best in their technical field. Well, that doesn't always necessarily make you a good manager. And so we're recognizing that, and we're trying to make some greater investments in terms of how our people leaders are trained and equipped to do a better job with that.
Thank you. Gary, did you want to add in on this?
Absolutely, and thanks, Mark. And Charlie, absolutely agree with you. Mark, when you first mentioned the question, what immediately came to mind is an old quote from Dr. W. Edwards Deming, one of the great grandparents of the modern process improvement age. And a student once asked him, when should I start process improvement? and he said, it doesn't matter when you start as long as you start now. I think the same thing came to mind. As Charlie said, all these things work together, but start now, do something. We ask our folks to work on something that bugs them, and it's usually small. Sometimes they get some success, and that's great, and we want to spread that. Sometimes they don't. We still want to recognize that and then be able to roll it back to say, oh, that was a good try, but it didn't really work. But we want everybody to roll up their sleeves and do something in their own realm. On the front line, that's usually operations, right? Improving how we engineer a bridge, improving how we maintain our roads. At the executive level, it's making small changes to get better employee engagement, as Charlie was talking about. Employee engagement is so crucial. Frontline folks can be engaged themselves. Sometimes they're reluctant. So those small changes in the executive suite where we can say, let's get our employees engaged here, or here, or here, today, tomorrow, get their feedback, get their involvement, get their ideas. That is so valuable. So it doesn't matter when you start, as long as you start today.
Absolutely. I just want to build on this idea of sometimes the ideas that we put forward won't necessarily be successful, and that's okay. I mean, we do pilots because we're trying to figure out what works and what doesn't work. Yet in some organizations, that's a difficult pill to swallow. You know, we're so used to, well, I made an initiative and it generated an X% productivity gain or reduced costs by this much. And I'm curious, in your organizations, have you seen a growing appetite for more experimentation and a willingness to fail fast, but celebrating that failure because the idea was, as Deming says, doing something? And, you know, maybe Daniel, if you want to kick us off with that one, that would be great.
Sure.
And then open to either of the two of you all.
Yeah, I'm not sure I would go as far as celebrating our failures. However, at FHWA, we like to think of ourselves as a learning organization. And we are often willing to, when we're talking about the organizational development, organizational planning, strategic planning, and setting up the new systems on how to do things throughout the organization, we're willing to march forward with that 80% solution. On this latest effort that I discussed earlier, our enterprise performance management effort, we've been working on this for a couple of years, and some of our initial ideas on how to best manage risk across the enterprise and improve performance across the enterprise haven't worked out. Some of them have been turned out to be either too resource intensive or too difficult to communicate effectively across such a diverse organization. So we've stepped back and made some improvements and some changes, and I think that's what you saw in the presentation today. So we think that ability to innovate and learn and accept that you're not going to get it right the first time is part of creating effective change.
Thank you. Charlie, you want to have a thought on this?
You know, yeah, this is a great topic. You know, one of the things that our director, Scott Marler, likes to say is that we need to have a bias towards action. And that comes with the idea that there needs to be some freedom to fail. But, you know, that is a difficult one to get people to really grab hold of, because what really matters is when people do that and they do fail, how does upper management react? That's the real test for whether or not you really do have freedom to fail. So yeah, we're working hard at that to try to create spaces in which people can experiment, and they really do have the freedom to fail and fail quickly and learn and improve.
And Mark, if I could ring in with amen on that, we're big believers in transparency and experimentation, and allowing folks to the room to fail. A lot of that storytelling can actually help with that. I've been with in public service in Colorado right about a decade. About 8 years ago, we tried something pretty large scale and made it transparent, and it didn't work. And that was and we actually made it public that was true and that was okay. And just briefly to set it up, in Colorado, our interstate system actually goes through a set of tunnels called the Eisenhower Johnson Memorial Tunnels at 11,000 feet to connect the eastern side of the mountains to the western side. In the winter, what people think about that is connecting Denver to Vail and to other ski places. Back in the day, we put 2 lanes in each direction. Boy, we wish we would probably have put 7 or 8 lanes in each direction, because on the weekends, those tunnels would get crowded and the traffic would back up a lot. Our research branch started applying some queuing theory and said, we think we've got a solution here. Our executive director at the time made it very public, saying we're going to try something different on the weekends based on this queuing theory, and it didn't work over a period of weekends. So we backed out the solution. We went back to the drawing board, literally, and the executive director made it very public that it didn't work and thanked the research branch, saying, hey, this is something that didn't work, and we're going to go, and we found something that doesn't work, just like Edison having 900 filaments that did not work for light bulbs. That helped us on the way to getting some solutions for that. Having that kind of transparency is important for anything we do in government, and having those kind of stories that we can tell maybe win over some of the skeptics to say, are you really serious about experimentation? Are you sure I'm not going to get into trouble? Having those stories are so powerful, Mark, just so powerful.
Makes a lot of sense. When we talk about organizational change, that's how you make those changes, is the stories that you tell in the organization and how people react to crises or failures in the organization, and then the stories they tell about it. Because those stories become the way that people perceive success in the organization, and so they'll continue that. What a great example, Gary.
Exactly. It's not my example. I supported the research branch. It was our executive director. Those leadership activities are so important. And think about that. That didn't take him but 5 minutes, right? It was so important to do that.
Makes a lot of sense. I want to come back to, Charlie, part of your presentation, because I obviously was taken with the shift in mission statement that Iowa DOT has adopted. But I want to broaden it, or actually narrow it a little bit, to thinking about the customer. We'll start with you, but then go around the horn as well. But how have you seen your organization rethink who is the customer of the services you're providing, and what implications does that have for how your organization can be excellent?
Yeah, that's a great setup, because one of those goals that you saw in our plan was improving customer service, and the way that we're going about that in this calendar year is to do a really deep dive on the question that you just asked. Who really is our customer? What do they really think about the services and products that we're providing? And how can we do better? And what we're finding is that's a really hard question to answer, actually, because there are a lot of customers. It's easy to just kind of simplify it and say, well, the customers are the people traveling on the roads. Well, yeah, that's a big segment of our customers, but like for the folks that I lead, the primary customer are the contractors that use the plans and specifications that we produce. They're our customer. And so there are, that same idea is unfolded across the whole organization. In reality, we have a lot of different customers, and they all have different needs and wants and expectations of us. And that's the real challenge, I think, when it comes to really understanding what your customers want, is because it's so multifaceted. So we're in the beginning stages of that study right now. We're going to be doing some focus groups, even some things that are kind of like what I call secret boss, where we'll send somebody in to a driver's license station, and they're there to record the customer experience and understand what's happening, give us a real unbiased look as to what are our customers really experiencing on a day-to-day basis.
Makes a lot of sense. Gary, any thoughts on this one?
Absolutely. Charlie, what you're talking about, again, brings to mind W. Edwards Deming. He would say, develop profound knowledge. And what he meant by that was understand your process and understand what your customers are getting out of that process. Again, it's easy for somebody to say, gosh, everybody across Colorado, 6 million people use our transportation system, so everybody's our customer. And it's hard to make improvement that way. Getting a bit more granular and developing that profound knowledge is so important. I'm a big, you can make improvement without tools, and that's, but there are some tools that are very useful. Swim lane flowcharts are useful. And swim lanes, by the way, for those of you who may not know, that you actually put down the steps that you go from a need to an actual product being developed, but you put it in swim lanes. Here's what our headquarters engineering group does. Here's what our group engineering group in Colorado Springs does. Here's what the contractor does. And that helps you develop an idea about profound knowledge about that process and about what who the customer really is. And then we can also say, hey, treat each other as customers. The next person down the line in that process, maybe they don't use the end product, but they use what you're giving them. So treat them as a customer and understand what their, what their needs are. Are you giving them a good product to use, or are they having to redo stuff that you're doing? Developing that empathy through the organization, developing that profound knowledge that is so crucial. And again, you can do process improvement without tools, just basic concepts to say, let's make something better. But some of these tools really make it a lot easier to build that profound knowledge and that empathy.
Makes a lot of sense. Daniel, any view on this as well?
Yeah, just a little bit. And I am an old Deming guy, Gary. So, but we haven't used the term customer in a couple of years, primarily because of our role in improving the transportation system. It's obviously it's different from the role of state DOT. Right now, we prefer to think of the in terms of stakeholders, and in just talking about one component of enterprise performance management, the risk management process. Our risk management process calls for us to engage stakeholders at every step of the process, from identifying context to identifying and analyzing risk, to developing those response strategies and then monitoring and following up. So we prefer to think of it as stakeholders, who they are, what their role is in each step of that process, and how we can engage, how we can communicate and consult with them.
Very good. We have time for hopefully one last question that I wanted to put out to the three of you, and that's the role of big data analytics. Certainly in lots of domains, we're seeing this being a powerful tool in trying to improve operations. Is it being used, and can you envision how it will really make your lives better and deliver more public value to your constituents? Gary, you look like you're ready to go on this one, so I'm going to let you get started.
Absolutely. About 7 or 8 years ago, we had a CDOT-wide initiative called the Future Forward Initiative. And we said, gosh, there's some things that are going to impact our operations. We had some sub-teams. One of them was around climate change, and that's very applicable right now. And one was about big data. And we recognized we had a ton of data, but we weren't doing very much with it, and we weren't helping the public with it. Fast forward to 2021, I'm very pleased to announce that we've been doing some really good stuff with data. There's the National Association of State Chiefs of Information Officers, known as NASCIO, recently gave an award to CDOT for our development of our GeoHub. We have a lot of geographic information system data, and unfortunately, in the past, we haven't been doing a whole lot with it. That is what it is. That was recognized a few years ago. A cross-functional team has put together this GeoHub that has wonderful capabilities for folks inside CDOT. Makes it a lot easier, but it's also public-facing to allow folks to have information. A small example of this, we have truckers going through Colorado. They want to be efficient and they want to be safe. You don't want to put a 17-foot high truck under a 15-foot high bridge, right? Disastrous. And we've been doing that. We've been providing that information from our staff to truckers, and that works okay. But it does take some cost and some time. We now have that capability for truckers to be able to, trucking companies, be able to do that themselves on the GeoHub. It's a wonderful application of big data. Take the information we have, apply it in different places, we're really pleased that the team that put that together has been recognized by NASCIO on that. So yes, big data is alive and well at CDOT.
Well, we're right up against time. Charlie, 60 seconds. Is this the thing for you guys?
Yeah, so I think my example of that would be, so in our, I lead our project development group. And so what we found is that when we put together a set of plans and specifications, we're creating a huge amount of data. But what we haven't been successful in doing is transferring a lot of that data in digital format to the later stages of what I call the infrastructure lifecycle. So we live in the planning, design, and construction phases, but then there's operations and maintenance and asset management. And so we're trying to figure out how can we leverage a lot of the data that we're creating during the project development phases so that it can be effectively leveraged for later phases of infrastructure management. It's a simple concept, but maddening, it's extremely complicated when you get down into the weeds of it. So we're kind of at the beginning stages of that, but I think that holds a lot of promise to be able to more effectively use and leverage, you know, the big data that we are custodians of and creators of as in our role as delivering projects.
Terrific. Well, I know our time is up. I see Matt is back on the screen, so I'm going to let Matt wrap us up. But let me thank the panelists for sharing their ideas and insights, and hope that we'll all be a little bit better for it. Matt, let me turn it back to you.
Great. Thank you very much, Mark, for moderating that. And thanks for joining us after you had to go teach class. I know I get tired after teaching classes, but thank you very much for joining us today. It was great. And also thanks to Gary, Daniel, and Charlie for participating. It was wonderful to hear from all of you. With that, we are somewhat finished for today. I don't know, Lori, if there's a final wrap-up slide. But again, please remember, this was the quiz that I was going to do at the end of this, because if you have two people who teach college classes, you got to have a quiz at the end of the session, right? So what's the portal address? It's tpm-portal.com. Please go there and get all your information on transportation performance management, how to sign up for future webinars, and if you want the recordings and slide decks and all that good stuff from past webinars. And if you have any ideas, we are always looking for ideas for content. So a lot of the ideas and everything that you hear about, the topics of the webinars, come from you as the members. We want to hear from you. You can send me an email, mhardy@ashto.org, and we sort of put those into, we capture them, and when we sort of start brainstorming about future webinars, we always kind of go to those and say, what do the members want to hear? Again, thanks for all the presenters, and especially to FHWA, to AASHTO, to the TPM pooled fund members, to the leadership group and all that for your time, money, support, all that good stuff. And to all of you on the line, we appreciate you joining us for today's webinar, and we hope to see you next time. Have a great Thanksgiving. Stay safe, travel safe, and I look forward to hearing you and seeing you in December, and hopefully at TRB, perhaps in the new year in person. So thanks, everyone. We'll see you later.